An Introduction to Constitutional Law, 100 plus Supreme Court Cases Everyone Should Know by Randy Barnett and Josh Blackman.
Enumerated powers on the Warren Court. Heart of Atlanta Motel versus United States, 1964, and Katzenbach versus McClung, 1964.
The Civil Rights Revolution of the 1950s and 1960s, sometimes referred to as the Second Reconstruction, ushered in monumental improvements for the rights and equality of African Americans in the United States. Beyond the courts, the primary drivers in this revolution were the elected branches. The enactment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its ensuing enforcement by the executive branch was of great importance in addressing segregation. Title II of the law guarantees, quote, full and equal enjoyment of any place of public accommodation without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. Title II applies to a business, quote, if its operations affect commerce. Congress made many findings about the burdens that discrimination by race or color places upon interstate commerce. Specifically, segregationist policies impeded interstate travel. For example, the Green Book provided African Americans with a listing of hotels they could stay while traveling. Soon, 2 test cases were filed: Heart of Atlanta Motel versus United States, 1964, and Katzenbach and McClung, 1964. The Heart of Atlanta Motel did not rent rooms to African American patrons. Its owner challenged the constitutionality of Title II, arguing that Congress lacked the power to prohibit racial discrimination in his local motel. The Warren Court unanimously rejected this claim. The court applied the substantial effects test and found that the power of Congress to promote interstate commerce also includes the power to regulate the local incidents thereof, including local activities in both the states of origin and destination, which might have a substantial and harmful effect upon that commerce. Writing for the court, Justice Clark found that the hotel was available to transient guests, accessible to interstate highways, solicits guests from national media, and 75% of its guests are from out of state. Therefore, the policies of the Heart of Atlanta Motel had a substantial effect on interstate commerce. Study guide: is the Warren Court's interpretation of what affects commerce broader than that of the New Deal Court? Or can this case be understood as regulating what the court later comes to call the channels and instrumentalities of commerce? Finally, this case was not decided solely on the basis of the Commerce Clause. Rather, Congress can also rely on the Necessary and Proper Clause. Quote, how obstructions in commerce may be removed, what means are to be employed, is within the sound and exclusive discretion of the Congress. It is subject only to one caveat, that the means chosen by it must be reasonably adapted to the end permitted by the Constitution. We cannot say that its choice here was not so adapted. The court's approach requires a fit between the means and the ends. This sort of analysis, which is taken from Chief Justice Marshall's opinion in McClung v. Maryland, indicates that Heart of Atlanta is also a Necessary and Proper Clause case. When Congress enacted the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the members did not rely solely on the Commerce and Necessary and Proper Clauses. Congress also relied on powers granted by the 14th Amendment, which was enacted in 1868 following the Civil War. The 14th Amendment has 5 sections. Section 5 gave Congress an important new enumerated power. Quote, the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. What are the provisions of this article? That phrase refers back to sections 1 through 4 of the 14th Amendment. Section 1 contains the now famous Equal Protection Clause. Quote, nor shall any state deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. If a state denies a person the equal protection of the law, Congress would have the power to enact appropriate legislation to enforce that person's civil rights. But the key word here is state. In civil rights cases decided in 1883, the Supreme Court held that Congress's enumerated powers under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment were limited to protecting people from state action, not segregation enforced by private businesses. Does this provision allow Congress to prohibit discrimination in private restaurants and hotels? In Heart of Atlanta Motel, only Justice William O. Douglas would have based the Civil Rights Act of 1964 on Congress's Section 5 powers. Such a basis, he thought, would make it unnecessary to litigate, quote, whether a particular restaurant or inn is within the commerce definitions of the Act, or whether a particular customer is an interstate traveler. Because such a construction would apply to all customers in all the enumerated places of public accommodation, he contended, it would put an end to all obstructionist strategies and finally close one door on a bitter chapter in American history. The other 8 justices relied solely on Congress's commerce and necessary and proper powers, not its Section 5 powers. Study guide. Would upholding the statute under Congress's Section 5 powers rather than its commerce powers have any advantages? Would it have any disadvantages? Is it more fitting, and also more limited, to base a civil rights law on the 14th Amendment than on the Commerce Clause? The second test case involved Ollie's Barbecue. This restaurant, which was located in Birmingham, Alabama, would not serve African American customers. Unlike the Heart of Atlanta Motel, Ollie's Barbecue did not serve any out-of-state customers. Nonetheless, the court found, quote, that a substantial portion of the food served in the restaurant had moved in interstate commerce. The theory that Congress could regulate local activity that utilized items that had previously traveled in interstate commerce came to be known as the jurisdictional hook. Professor David Engdahl has dubbed this the herpes theory of jurisdiction, since once an item has traveled in interstate commerce, it forever retains that trait.